The mining colony on Kepler 442b was supposed to be peaceful. Jake Morrison had been captain of the New Horizon for 3 years, and he liked the quiet life they had built on this distant world. The planet was rich in rare metals that Earth needed for its growing space fleet, and the work was honest and steady. Lisa Harper wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked the mining equipment one more time. The giant machines pulled valuable ore from deep underground, running day and night. She had designed most of the systems herself, and they worked better than anyone back on Earth had expected. The colony was ahead of schedule and under budget, which made everyone happy. Tony Rodriguez walked the perimeter of the main settlement, checking the security systems. Most people thought security was pointless on a mining world, but Tony had been a soldier before he became a colonial security chief. He knew that being prepared was always better than being sorry. The defensive systems he had installed were simple but effective, designed to look like basic protection against wildlife and accidents. The colony had been operating for 18 months without any major problems. Karen Wells, the colonial administrator, sent regular reports back to Earth about their progress. The miners were happy. The equipment was working well, and they had found even more valuable deposits than the original surveys had shown. Life was good on Kepler-44b that changed on a Tuesday morning when the long-range sensors picked up something unusual. Jake was drinking his morning coffee when the alert came through. 5 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, and they were not human ships. Lisa ran to the command center when she heard the alarm. The ships on the scanner were unlike anything in the human database. They were sleek and angular, with energy signatures that suggested advanced technology. Jake called for a colony-wide meeting while Tony activated the emergency protocols. The strange ships moved closer to the planet, taking their time. They seemed to be scanning everything, learning about the human settlement. Karen tried to open communication channels, but the alien ships ignored all attempts at contact. They just kept scanning and moving closer. Dan Cooper was working in the deep mines when the emergency signal reached him. He shut down the heavy machinery and gathered his crew. Like most of the miners, Don had military experience from Earth's earlier conflicts. He knew the sound of trouble when he heard it. The miners began securing the equipment and preparing for whatever might come next. The alien ships finally answered Karen's communication attempts after 6 hours of silence. The message was broadcast on all frequencies in perfect English, which surprised everyone in the colony. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated by some kind of computer system. "Primitive humans of the third planet," the voice said. "You have entered territory controlled by the Zephyrian Collective. Your presence here is unauthorized and unwelcome. You will surrender all resources and submit to tributary status immediately." Jake looked at the faces around him in the command. Senator Karen was trying to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. Lisa was already thinking about technical solutions to their problem. Tony was checking weapon systems that were supposed to be secret. The alien voice continued. "You have 72 hours to comply with our demands. Remove all mining equipment, and prepare your population for relocation. Your world now belongs to the collective. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your settlement." Karen activated the communication system. "This is Colonial Administrator Karen Wells of the Human Settlement on Kepler 44b. We are peaceful miners with no hostile intentions. Perhaps we can negotiate a solution that benefits everyone." The response came quickly and was not encouraging. "Negotiation is not possible. Your species has barely achieved interstellar travel. You possess only primitive weapons and basic shielding technology. Compliance is your only option. You have 71 hours and 53 minutes remaining." The communication ended, leaving the colonists in shocked silence. They had always known that contact with alien species was possible, but everyone had hoped it would be peaceful. The Zephyrians clearly had different ideas about how first contact should work. Jake called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. Tony presented his assessment of the situation. The alien ships appeared to be warships, probably equivalent to human frigates based on their size and energy output. There were 5 of them, which meant the colonists were badly outnumbered. Lisa suggested that they might be able to hide some of the mining equipment in the deep tunnels. If they had to abandon the surface, they could at least save some of their work. Don agreed, saying his crews could move the most valuable machinery underground within a day. Karen was already preparing diplomatic messages to send back to Earth. But everyone knew that help was months away. The nearest human fleet was in the Sol system, and even the fastest ships would take weeks to reach. Kepler 4-4 to be. The colonists were on their own. What none of them knew was that their situation was not as desperate as it seemed. Hidden in the asteroid belt at the edge of the system, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Phillips was watching everything from his stealth ship, the Shadowhawk. The reconnaissance vessel had been monitoring the outer colonies for months, staying invisible and gathering intelligence. Ryan had been listening to the Zephyrian communications since their ships arrived. His advanced sensors could track their movements and analyze their technology. More importantly, his ship had a direct communication link to Earth. It could send messages faster than any normal ship could travel. The message Ryan sent to Admirals Lee and Burke at Fleet Command was simple, but urgent. First, hostile alien contact at Kepler 4-4 to be 5 enemy warships threatening human colony. Aliens demand surrender within 72 hours. Colony has 800 civilians with minimal defensive capability, require immediate military response. Message reached Earth in less than an hour. Admiral Burke was in a meeting with the Defense Council when the alert came through. The room fell silent as she read Ryan's report aloud. Everyone knew this moment would come eventually, but no one had expected it to happen so soon. General Paul Martinez was the first to speak. What do we know about these Zephyrians? Are they part of a larger group, or just a single species? Dr. Amanda Foster, the fleet's chief intelligence officer, pulled up what little information they had. Based on their name and behavior, they appear to be a collective of multiple species. Their demand for tributary status suggests they have experience conquering other worlds. They probably see us as just another primitive species to be absorbed. Admiral Burke stood up and walked to the star map on the wall. Kepler 4-2b was marked with a small red dot, looking very alone in the vast darkness of space. They picked the wrong species to underestimate, she said quietly. How quickly can we get a relief force to that system? General Martinez consulted his tactical display. Fleet Admiral Stephen Blake can have a task force ready to depart within 12 hours. Travel time to Kepler 4-2b is approximately 60 hours using our fastest ships. Make it happen, Admiral Burke ordered. And make sure Admiral Blake understands the rules of engagement. These aliens have threatened human civilians and demanded our surrender. They need to learn what that means. Back on Kepler 4-4b, the colonists continued their preparations. They had no idea that help was already on the way, or that their situation was about to become much more complicated. The Zephyrians were confident in their superiority. Having conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics, the aliens had made their first mistake when they assumed humans would be easy to intimidate. They were about to discover that humanity had been preparing for interstellar warfare since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered, who else might be out there? Jake Morrison looked out at the alien ships hanging in orbit above his world. In less than 3 days, everything would change. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant by appropriate force. Admiral Helen Burke stood in the center of Fleet Command, watching the large display screen that showed the positions of every human ship in known space. The red dot marking Kepler 4-4b seemed to pulse with urgency. Around her, the most experienced military officers in human space were preparing for humanity's first interstellar war. General Paul Martinez spread tactical displays across the main table, the information Ryan Phillips had sent from his hidden. The position was detailed and concerning. The Zephyrian ships were larger than human frigates, but smaller than cruisers, their energy signature suggested. Advanced shielding and weapons systems that could pose a real threat to unprotected colonies. Dr. Amanda Foster finished her analysis of the alien communications. The Zephyrians had made several references to previous conquests in tributary worlds. This was not their first time demanding surrender from other species. They had clearly done this many times before and expected it to work again, I think. We are primitives, Dr. Foster explained to the assembled officers. Their intelligence gathering is obviously incomplete. They see our mining equipment and basic colonial defenses, but they have no idea what our real military capabilities look like. Admiral Burke nodded grimly. Humanity had been careful about revealing their true strength to anyone watching from space. Colonial settlements were deliberately kept looking simple and peaceful. Military installations were hidden or disguised as civilian facilities. Any alien observers would see exactly what the humans wanted them to see. What forces can we deploy? Admiral Burke asked. General Martinez. The general activated a holographic display showing ship positions throughout human space. Fleet Admiral Stephen. Blake can take command of Task Force 7. The battleship Valiant is currently in the Centauri system, conducting training exercises. Heavy cruisers Defiance and Retribution are available from the Mars shipyards. We can also assign 12 destroyers from the home fleet. Dr. Foster looked concerned. Is that enough firepower to handle 5 alien warships, plus whatever reinforcements they might call? General Martinez smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Doctor, you are thinking like the aliens? They see our ships and assume we build them the same way they do. They have no concept of human military engineering or our approach to space combat. Admiral Burke walked to another display, showing technical specifications of human warships. The numbers were classified at the highest levels, known only to senior fleet officers and government leaders. What the display showed would have shocked any alien observers. The battleship Valiant was not just larger than anything the Zephyrians had built, was designed according to human military doctrine, which assumed that any future war would be fought against enemies with similar or superior technology. Every human warship was built to fight outnumbered and win. Fleet Admiral Stephen Blake received his orders while the Valiant was conducting gunnery practice in the Centauri system. The practice targets were asteroids that had been selected to match the size and composition of typical alien spacecraft. Blake watched his gunners reduce mountain-sized rocks to dust with casual precision. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the Valiant and had been Blake's second in command for 5 years. Understood human naval doctrine better than almost anyone in the fleet. When Blake explained their mission, she immediately began calculating firing solutions and tactical approaches for engaging unknown alien technology. Commander Rhett Johnson led the destroyer squadron that would accompany the main fleet. His 12 ships were the newest and fastest in human space. Equipped with experimental weapon systems that had never been used in actual combat, the destroyer crews were eager to test their capabilities against real enemies. The human fleet began moving toward Kepler-4 for to be within 10 hours of receiving Admiral Burke's orders. What looked like a standard deployment to any outside observer was actually a carefully planned demonstration of human military capabilities. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical decision was designed to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. On Kepler-4 to B, the colonists continued preparing for what seemed like inevitable defeat. Jake Morrison tried to keep morale up, but everyone could see the alien ships growing larger in the sky as they moved closer to the planet. The Zephyrians were taking their time, confident that the humans would surrender before the deadline. Tony Rodriguez worked around the clock to prepare defensive positions. His security teams installed additional weapons that had been stored in sealed containers marked as mining equipment. The colonists were surprised to discover that their peaceful mining world had been equipped with military-grade defensive systems from the beginning. Lisa Harper and her engineering teams began implementing protocols that seemed designed for exactly this situation. Mining tunnels were converted into shelters and supply depots. Heavy machinery was repositioned to serve as improvised fortifications. Everything suggested that someone had planned for the possibility of alien attack. Dan Cooper led his mining crews in what appeared to be frantic efforts to hide valuable equipment. In reality, they were positioning industrial tools that could serve double duty as weapons if necessary. The massive ore processors could be converted into kinetic bombardment systems with a few modifications. Karen Wells maintained communication with the Zephyrian fleet, trying to buy time and gather intelligence. Aliens were becoming impatient. With human requests for negotiation, Their responses revealed growing frustration with what they saw as primitive stubbornness. "Your deadline approaches," the Zephyrian commander broadcast. "We have been generous in allowing you time to accept the inevitable. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Submit now, or face the consequences of defying the collective." What the Zephyrians did not know was that every word of their communications was being recorded and analyzed by Ryan Phillips aboard the hidden Shadowhawk. His stealth systems kept him completely invisible, while his sensors gathered detailed information about alien technology and tactics. Ryan's reports, too. Fleet Command revealed that the Zephyrians were following standard procedures that they had obviously used many times before. They positioned their ships for maximum psychological impact, broadcast threatening messages at regular intervals, and waited for their targets to break under pressure. It was an effective strategy against species that had never faced serious military opposition. The aliens made several attempts to scan the human colony for detailed information about population and resources. They were frustrated to discover that human technology included sophisticated jamming systems that made accurate scanning difficult. What they could detect suggested a typical primitive settlement with basic defensive capabilities. Admiral Burke received regular updates on the situation as the human relief fleet moved toward the target system. She was particularly interested in the psychological profile that Dr. Foster was developing based on Zephyrian communications. The aliens showed clear signs of overconfidence and inflexibility that could be exploited. They have been successful using intimidation for so long that they cannot imagine it failing, Dr. Foster reported. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on the assumption that showing superior force will cause immediate surrender. They have no backup plan for dealing with enemies who refuse to be intimidated. General Martinez was more concerned with technical capabilities. The Zephyrian ships used energy weapons and defensive shields that were common among spacefaring civilizations. They were effective against similar technology, but had never been tested against human kinetic weapons that operated on completely different principles. Fleet Admiral Blake reviewed the tactical situation as his ships approached the outer edge of the Kepler system. Zephyrians had positioned themselves in a standard intimidation formation around the planet. They were clearly visible to anyone on the surface, but their positioning made them vulnerable to attack from multiple angles. Captain Chen prepared her crew for their first combat against alien enemies. The Valiant had been designed to fight in exactly this kind of situation, outnumbered against technologically advanced opponents. Human engineering had focused on creating ships that could survive heavy damage while delivering overwhelming firepower. Commander Johnson's destroyer squadron took positions that would allow them to engage the alien fleet from unexpected directions. The small, fast ships were equipped with weapons that could penetrate any known shielding technology. They would serve as the sword while the battleship and cruisers acted as the hammer. The stage was set for humanity's first demonstration of what they considered appropriate military response. The Zephyrians were about to discover that their assumptions about primitive human technology were dangerously incorrect. The galaxy was about to witness the difference between conquest and warfare. The Zephyrian fleet moved into position around Kepler 4-4 to be like predators circling their prey. Commander Vexeri stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human colony through the main view screen. After 3 days of waiting, he was ready to demonstrate the consequences of defying the collective. Jake Morrison gathered his senior staff in the command center as the alien deadline approached. Through the windows, they could see the Zephyrian ships hanging in the sky like dark omens. The aliens had grown tired of waiting and were preparing to attack the colony. Tony Rodriguez checked his defensive systems one final time. The weapons he had installed were hidden throughout the settlement, designed to look like mining equipment or communication arrays. The colonists had no idea how well-armed their peaceful world really was. Humans of Kepler 4-4 to B, Commander Vexeri broadcast across all frequencies. Your time has expired. You've chosen to resist the inevitable. We will now demonstrate the price of defying the collective. Surrender immediately, or watch your settlement burn. Karen Wells tried one last attempt at diplomacy. Commander Vexeri, we are willing to discuss terms. Surely there is a solution that does not require violence. We have families here, children, who have done nothing wrong. The alien commander's response was cold and final. Your concerns are irrelevant. You are primitives who have forgotten your place in the galaxy. We will remind you. The first Zephyrian attack came at dawn. 3 sleek raiders dove toward the colony's communication center, intending to cut off contact with the outside universe. The aliens expected no resistance from the primitive humans below. They were wrong, Tony. Rodriguez waited until the alien ships were committed to their attack run before activating his hidden defenses. Anti-aircraft batteries that had been disguised as mining towers suddenly came to life, tracking the incoming raiders with deadly precision. The first Zephyrian ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The pilot had no time to react as human. Kinetic rounds tore through his shields like they were made of paper. The second raider tried to pull away, but another battery caught it with a direct hit. It sent the wreckage spinning into the ground. The third alien pilot managed to fire his weapons at the colony before being shot down. But his energy beam struck defensive barriers that absorbed the impact without taking damage. The human settlement was protected by shielding technology that the Esphrians did not recognize. Commander Vexeri stared at his tactical display in shock. 3 of his best raiders had been destroyed in less than 30 seconds by what was supposed to be a defenseless human colony. The primitive settlement had weapons that could penetrate, collective shielding, and defenses that could stop collective energy weapons. Impossible, he whispered to his tactical officer. Their technology is barely adequate for space travel. How can they have such advanced defensive systems? The tactical officer was equally confused. Sir, our intelligence reports indicated that humans possess only basic kinetic weapons and primitive energy shields. These defensive systems are far more sophisticated than anything we expected. Lisa Harper monitored the battle from the engineering center. The defensive systems were working exactly as designed, but she knew this was only the beginning. Real test would come when the Zephyrians realized they were facing an enemy that could fight back. Dan Cooper and his mining crews watched from the deep tunnels as more alien ships approached the colony. The Zephyrians were being more careful now, but they were still coming. The aliens had committed themselves to this attack and could not back down without losing face. Commander Vexeri ordered his remaining ships to coordinate their assault. If the humans had better defenses than expected, he would simply use more firepower to overwhelm them. The collective fleet began moving into bombardment formation. That was when Fleet Admiral Stephen Blake arrived. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, immediately launching electronic warfare attacks that blinded Zephyrian sensors across the entire star system. The aliens suddenly found their communications jammed, their targeting systems disrupted, and their coordination networks completely useless. Captain Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the battleship Valiant, watching the chaos on the alien fleets. Formation. The Zephyrians were trying to re-establish contact with each other, but human jamming technology was far more advanced than anything they had encountered. Sir, her tactical officer reported, the alien fleet is attempting to reorganize, but they cannot coordinate their movements. They are operating blind. Blake nodded with satisfaction. Then let us introduce ourselves properly. Captain Chen, you may fire when ready. The Valiant's main guns had been designed to destroy targets much larger and better protected than Zephyrian warships. When Captain Chen gave the order to fire, the results were immediate and devastating. A single volley from the battleship's kinetic batteries struck 2 Zephyrian vessels. The alien ships simply disintegrated under the impact of projectiles, traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Their shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, were completely useless against solid matter moving at such incredible velocity. Commander Vexeri watched in horror as 2 of his best ships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Human weapons were unlike anything in the collective database. They used raw, kinetic energy instead of directed energy, making them impossible to defend against using conventional shielding. All ships retreat to maximum range, he ordered frantically. We need time to analyze their capabilities and develop countermeasures. But Commander Greg Johnson's destroyer squadron was already moving to intercept the fleeing aliens. Is a small, Fast human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to cut off the Zephyrian escape routes. Each human destroyer was equipped with weapons that could engage multiple targets simultaneously. The Zephyrians discovered that their numerical advantage meant nothing when each enemy ship could outfight several of their vessels at once. The destroyer USS Ranger engaged 3 Zephyrian raiders simultaneously using its advanced targeting systems to track all 3 enemies while maneuvering to avoid their return fire. The human ship's weapons struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling the alien vessels without destroying them completely. Commander Johnson watched the tactical display with professional interest. His destroyers were performing exactly as designed, demonstrating the superiority of human military engineering over alien technology. The Zephyrians were not bad fighters, but they were completely outclassed. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the alien commander is attempting to surrender. He is requesting safe passage for his remaining ships." Johnson considered the request. His orders were to demonstrate human capabilities, not to massacre a defeated enemy. "Denied. Tell him that surrender will be accepted, but there will be no safe passage. His ships will be captured, and his crews will be interrogated." On the planet's surface, the colonists watched the battle through their observation posts. Jake Morrison could hardly believe what he was seeing. The human fleet was systematically destroying or capturing alien vessels that had seemed invincible just hours before. Tony Rodriguez checked his defensive systems and realized they were no longer needed. The space battle was already over, decided by the overwhelming superiority of human technology and tactics. The Zephyrians had expected to fight primitives and instead encountered a military force that exceeded their capabilities in every category. Lisa Harper began analyzing the sensor data from the battle. The information would be valuable for understanding alien technology and improving human defenses. More importantly, it would help Earth prepare for contact with other alien species, who might prove more dangerous than the Zephyrians' commander. Vexeri made his final transmission as human Marines prepared to board his flagship. "How is this possible? Your species has barely achieved interstellar travel. You should not possess such advanced military technology." Fleet Admiral Blake responded personally. "Commander, you made the mistake of judging humanity by your own limitations. We have been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars. You are not the first enemies we have faced, and you will not be the last." The Zephyrian fleet was captured within 6 hours of the human arrival. Not a single human vessel was seriously damaged, while the alien force was completely destroyed or disabled. The demonstration was complete, but its implications would echo across the galaxy. The collective had learned that humanity was not another primitive species to be easily conquered. They had encountered a military force that treated interstellar warfare as a science. It's not an art. The humans had just announced their arrival on the galactic stage in the most effective way possible. The real lesson, however, was yet to come. Commander Vexeri sat in the detention cell aboard the human battleship Valiant, trying to understand what had happened to his fleet. In less than 6 hours, the mighty Zephyrian force had been completely defeated by ships that should not have existed. The humans had technology that made collective weapons look like primitive tools. Fleet Admiral Stephen Blake walked through the captured alien flagship, examining the technology that had seemed so advanced just hours before. Human engineers were already taking apart Zephyrian systems, learning how they worked and finding their weaknesses. What they discovered was disappointing. Captain Lisa Chen joined Blake in the alien ship's command center, Zephyrian Bridge. It was impressive to look at, but the actual technology was decades behind human standards. "Sir, our technical teams have completed their initial analysis. These ships are well built, but not particularly advanced by our standards." Blake nodded as he examined a Zephyrian weapon console. They had been successful because they had been fighting species even less advanced than themselves. They mistake technological superiority over primitives for actual military capability. Dr. Amanda Foster arrived on the next transport, eager to interrogate the captured aliens. The Zephyrians had been quiet since their capture, probably trying to understand how they had been defeated so easily. She was particularly interested in learning about the structure of the collective and its other member species. The interrogation of Commander Vexeri began in the ship's conference room. The alien commander was defiant at first, refusing to provide information about collective territory or military capabilities. His attitude changed quickly when Dr. Foster began explaining what humanity had learned from scanning his ships. "Your weapons use focused energy beams that are effective against similar technology," Dr. Foster explained calmly. "Your shields are designed to deflect directed energy attacks. Your ships are built for intimidation and quick strikes against inferior opponents. None of this works against human military doctrine." Vexeri's confidence cracked as he realized how thoroughly the humans understood his technology. "How do you know so much about collective systems? Your species has no experience with interstellar warfare." Dr. Foster smiled. "Commander, you keep making the same mistake. You assume that because we are new to this region of space, we are new to warfare itself. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to analyze enemy capabilities and exploit weaknesses." The interrogation revealed disturbing information about the Zephyrian collective. They controlled dozens of star systems through intimidation and technological superiority over primitive species. Most of their member worlds were actually conquered territories that provided resources and tribute to the collective leadership fleet. Admiral Blake made a decision that would reshape galactic politics. Instead of simply defeating the Zephyrian raid, he would demonstrate the full scope of human capabilities to ensure that no other alien species would make the same mistake. The lesson needed to be clear and unmistakable. Blake contacted Admiral Helen Burke on Earth, explaining his plan. "The Zephyrians are not just raiders. They represent a much larger civilization that has been conquering primitive worlds for centuries. If we only defeat this one fleet, they will simply send a larger force later." Admiral Burke understood immediately. "Ow. What do you need?" "Industrial support ships and construction equipment," Blake replied.
"I want to build a forward operating
base in this system. The aliens need to see what human industrial capacity looks like when we decide to establish a permanent presence." On Kepler 44b, the colonists watched in amazement as human ships began arriving from multiple directions. What had started as a simple rescue mission was becoming a major military operation. Jake Morrison counted over 50 ships in orbit around his planet, including massive vessels he had never seen before. Lisa Harper was called up to the fleet to consult on the construction project. When she arrived aboard the industrial ship Forge Master, she could hardly believe what she saw. The humans were planning to convert the entire asteroid belt into a shipyard and supply depot within a matter of days. Engineer Don Cooper joined the construction effort, bringing his mining expertise to help process asteroids into raw materials. The scale of the operation was incredible. Human industrial ships were breaking apart mountains of rock and metal, refining them into pure elements, and feeding the materials into automated factories that built new ships and equipment. Commander Vexeri was brought to observe the construction from the observation deck of the Valiant. What he saw there broke his understanding of what was possible. The humans were building a major military installation in the time it would take the collective to move a single fleet from one system to another. "This is impossible," he whispered to Dr. Foster. "No species can construct facilities this quickly. Where are your factory worlds? How many systems does humanity control to support this level of industrial output?" Dr. Foster watched the construction with professional interest. "Commander, you are seeing standard human engineering protocols. We design everything to be built quickly and efficiently. This is not even a major operation by our standards." The truth was even more shocking than what Vexeri could see. The human ships were not just building a base, they were demonstrating technologies that the collective had never imagined. Automated mining systems stripped entire asteroids in hours. Mobile factories converted raw materials into finished products with no waste or delay. Captain Jake Morrison was invited to tour the construction site aboard a human shuttle. What he saw convinced him that Earth had been preparing for interstellar warfare on a scale that civilian colonists could never have imagined. The peaceful mining colony had been just the visible tip of a massive military and industrial machine. The Zephyrian prisoners were forced to watch as human capabilities became clear. ships that would take collective shipyards months to build, were completed in days. Defensive installations that represented major engineering projects for alien civilizations were assembled like simple toys. Tony Rodriguez worked with human military engineers to upgrade the planetary defenses. The weapons that had seemed so impressive during the battle were replaced with systems that could destroy entire fleets. The colony that had seemed helpless was becoming a fortress that could defend itself against any conceivable attack. Admiral L. Burke arrived with the main battle fleet 3 days after construction began. The force she brought was intended to demonstrate that the relief fleet had been just a small sample of human military power. Hundreds of ships filled the system, representing firepower that could conquer entire civilizations. Commander Vexteri was brought before Admiral Burke for a final interrogation. The alien commander was no longer defiant or confident. He had seen enough human capabilities to understand that the collective faced an enemy that exceeded their technology by generations. "Admiral," he said quietly, "what do you want from the collective? You will pay tribute, provide resources, accept any terms you demand. Please do not destroy our worlds." Admiral Burke studied the alien commander with interest. "Commander, you still do not understand. We are not conquerors like you. We do not want tribute or resources. We want to be left alone to pursue our own goals without interference." Vexteri was confused. "Then why this demonstration? Why build this base? Why show us your true capabilities?" "Because," Admiral Burke explained patiently, "we want to make sure that no other species makes the same mistake you did. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity is not a primitive species to be conquered or intimidated. We prefer peace, but we are fully prepared for war." The construction project was completed in less than a week. Where there had been empty space, now stood a military base that could support human operations throughout the region. The Zephyrians realized they were witnessing the birth of a new galactic superpower fleet. Admiral Blake prepared for the next phase of the operation. The demonstration of human industrial capacity was complete, but the real message still needed to be delivered. The collective controlled dozens of worlds through fear and intimidation. It was time to free those worlds and show the galaxy what human civilization could offer. The prisoners watched as human ships prepared to leave the system, expected to be released or executed. But Admiral Burke had different plans. They would be witnesses to what happened when humanity decided to reshape galactic politics according to their own principles. The age of collective dominance was ending. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Commander Vexteri stood on the observation deck of the human battleship Valiant, watching his homeworld grow larger on the view screen. The collective capital of Zephyr Prime had never been approached by an enemy fleet, but now it was surrounded by hundreds of human warships. The sight filled him with despair and wonder in equal measure. Admiral Helen Burke had arrived with the main battle fleet 2 weeks after the demonstration at Kepler 44b. The force she brought was larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels filled the space around every major collective world simultaneously. The humans had struck everywhere at once. Fleet Admiral Stephen Blake stood beside the alien commander, watching the peaceful surrender of another collective stronghold. In the past month, 43 Zephyrian worlds had surrendered without firing a shot. The aliens had learned that resistance was not just futile, it was impossible. "How?" Vexteri asked quietly. "How do you have so many ships? Your species has only been in space for a few decades. The collective has been building fleets for centuries." Blake turned to look at the defeated alien commander. "You built ships to intimidate primitives. You built ships to fight wars against enemies who might be stronger than ourselves. The difference in approach created the difference in capability." Captain Lisa Chin monitored the surrender negotiations from the bridge. The collective leadership had finally accepted that they could not win against human forces. Their last attempt at resistance had ended when a single human destroyer disabled an entire collective battle group without taking damage. The systematic liberation of collective territory had taken only 3 weeks. Human forces moved faster than the aliens could coordinate their defenses. Each world fell before the collective leadership could mount an effective response. The speed of human operations was as devastating as their technological superiority. Dr. Amanda Foster was busy documenting the political structure of the former collective territories. What she found was both encouraging and disturbing. Most of the member worlds were actually conquered populations who had been forced into tributary relationships. Many species had been waiting for someone powerful enough to free them. On the liberated world of Kepler-7, Captain Jake Morrison met with representatives of the local population. The blue-skinned humanoids had been under collective rule for over a century. They could hardly believe that their oppressors had been defeated so quickly and completely. "Are you certain the Zephyrians will not return?" asked the local leader. An elderly female named Zara. "They have ships in other regions. Resources we know nothing about. Perhaps this is just a temporary setback for them." Morrison showed her the tactical displays from the recent battles. The collective fleet has been completely destroyed or captured. Their shipyards are under human control. Their government has surrendered unconditionally. They will never threaten anyone again. Lisa Harper worked with engineering teams across a dozen worlds, helping to rebuild infrastructure that had been damaged by collective exploitation. The aliens had strip-mined entire planets, leaving ecological disasters that would take decades to repair. Human technology could accelerate the healing process significantly. Tony Rodriguez established security protocols for the liberated territories. Many worlds had populations that had never been allowed to defend themselves. They would need time and training to establish their own military forces. Human advisors would help, but each world would ultimately be responsible for its own protection. The final surrender ceremony took place on Zephyr Prime, the former capital of the collective. Admiral Burke stood in the Great Hall where collective leaders had once planned the conquest of primitive worlds. Now those same leaders knelt before her, offering their complete submission to human authority. "We surrender all collective territories." "To human control," spoke the High Counselor, an ancient Zephyrian, whose voice shook with defeat. "We place ourselves at your mercy and accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate for our crimes against other species." Admiral Burke looked at the assembled alien leaders with something approaching pity. "Counselor, you still do not understand what humanity represents. We did not come here to conquer your worlds or enslave your people. We came to stop you from doing those things to others." The High Counselor looked confused. "Then what do you want from us? What are your terms for peace? Integration." Admiral Burke replied simply.
Admiral.
"The collective as a political entity no longer exists. Your species can choose to join the growing community of free worlds under human protection. Or you can remain isolated and face an uncertain future alone." Dan Cooper helped establish mining operations on several liberated worlds, but under completely different principles than collective exploitation. The new facilities were designed to benefit local populations rather than extracting wealth for distant masters. Human technology made it possible to extract resources without destroying environments. Commander Greg Johnson led diplomatic missions to worlds in neighboring regions that had heard about the collective's defeat. Many alien species were eager to establish contact with the humans who had ended centuries of Zephyrian oppression. Others were terrified of what human expansion might mean for their own civilizations. The psychological impact of humanity's arrival was as important as the military defeat of the collective. Species throughout the region realized that the galactic balance of power had changed permanently. The age of small-scale conflicts and limited territorial disputes was over. Dr. Foster established the first human embassy on Zephyr Prime, converting the former collective command center into a diplomatic facility. Representatives from dozens of species arrived daily, seeking trade agreements, defense pacts, or simply trying to understand what human civilization offered. The response to human expansion varied dramatically among different species. Some, like the Kepler-7 natives, embraced human partnership enthusiastically. Others remained suspicious of any species powerful enough to destroy the collective so easily. Few tried to organize resistance movements against human influence. Captain Morrison found himself appointed as administrator for an entire sector of former collective space. The job was overwhelming at first, but human organizational systems made it manageable. Advanced computer networks coordinated relief efforts across dozens of worlds simultaneously. Commander McSary was offered a choice that surprised him. Instead of imprisonment or execution. He could serve as a liaison between human authorities and former collective populations. Many Zephyrians trusted him more than they trusted the aliens who had conquered them. "Why would you trust me with such responsibility?" he asked Admiral Burke. "I tried to destroy your colony and conquer your people. By any reasonable standard, I am your enemy." Burke smiled. "Commander, you are not our enemy. You are following the only system you knew. Now you have seen what human civilization can offer. The choice of what to do with that knowledge is yours to make." The transformation of former collective space took 6 months. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources became thriving partners in human trade networks. Species that had been enslaved became independent members of an expanding alliance. The Zephyrians themselves adapted to their new role as one species, among many rather than masters of a conquered empire. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the space station that now orbited Kepler-4 for 2b. His mining colony had become the regional headquarters for human expansion into this part of the galaxy. Ships arrived daily, carrying diplomats, traders, and refugees from other conflicts. The galaxy was learning to adapt to human concepts of civilization. Instead of conquest and tribute, humans offered partnership and mutual benefit. Instead of technological stagnation under oppressive rulers, they offered advancement and growth. The change was revolutionary. Admiral Burke prepared for the next phase of human expansion. Reports were coming in about other civilizations in distant regions, some of which might pose greater threats than the collective had represented. Humanity would need to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The message was spreading across the galaxy through trade routes and communication networks. Humanity had arrived as a major power, and their definition of appropriate force was very different from anything other species had experienced. The age of human dominance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the end, the collective's greatest mistake had been their assumption that humans were just another primitive species to be conquered. They had learned too late that humanity's approach to warfare and civilization operated on a completely different scale from anything they had imagined possible.